meet an orc in your world and can already guess everything about him, well, that's not world building, that's wallpaper. And it's kind of boring. Because when everyone in your culture or species feels almost the same, your audience checks out. Heroes in your world can guess a character's personality simply from their species, and that is a cultural monolith, also known as the Planet of Hats trope. But don't despair, you can fix it, and without overhauling your entire world in the process. I'm Janet from World Anvil, and I'm going to show you how. Planet of Hats is the biggest reason most fictional peoples and cultures feel flat, so let's dig into exactly what it means. The name comes from Star Trek and similar IPs, hence the planet bit, where explorers swung by a new world each week, meeting new alien species and cultures that were never seen again. Essentially, it was a shortcut for Monster of the Week style episodic storytelling. Without time for the details, these Planet of Hats peoples all shared a single identity across an entire planet, one set of central characteristics. Essentially, this reduced cultures down to a hat everyone wore. Hence, Planet of Hats. Writing and world building has come a long way, but many of our own creations can still tend towards Planet of Hats, at least at the beginning. Your dwarves all love gold and mining. Your Klingons are all warriors. Your elves are all proud and elegant and snooty. Or it can simply be that every person in the village follows exactly the same code of ethics, or is attuned to nature. So what's wrong with that? Well, every time a dwarf shows up with a Scottish accent and a yearning for their mines, I die a little inside. No, but seriously, your audience's eyes will glaze over. You're losing variety, intrigue, and engagement from your stories. And you're building in predictability, which is the enemy of curiosity. It's also pretty unrealistic, because if everyone's a miner, who's the doctor? Who's farming? Who's making fancy elven furniture? Who's doing the washing up? And even worse, a Planet of Hats makes your NPCs interchangeable and boring. Using culture as a personality might feel like a shortcut to creating consistency, but you're actually creating monotony. So how do we fix it? Well, there are 4 opportunities to tweak your species and cultures so they feel authentic and interesting. And I'm going to show you where they are so you can't miss them. Use them and your audience will be curious and hooked by all the people in your world. To start with, if you're using recognizable versions of stock fantasy species, subvert those tropes. What do I mean by stock fantasy species? Well, anything that is an obvious cognate to elves, dwarves, orcs, goblins, and halflings. For example, Na'vi and Vulcans are space elves, and Klingons and Gamorreans are space orcs, right down to the pointy ears and oversized battle axes. But this is your world, and these are your space elves, dwarves, and goblins. So dehatify, unhat them with some unexpected twists to their stock tropes. If you have unusual world rules like weird magic or floating islands, how have these species dealt with those? If not, your twist could be simple. Figure out your stock species' central obsession. For dwarves, it's craftsmanship. For halflings, it's pursuit of comfort. Then twist that obsession. Maybe your dwarves craft exquisite fabric using spider silk and mycelial fibers. Your halflings have wings and create arboreal nests, still prizing comfort in an entirely different way. The key here is that twist applies to the whole species or culture. How can you shake things up so they feel familiar but fresh for your audience on a world level? Build this into the species article on World Anvil. There are prompts and advice there to help you with the anthropology of sapient species as well as the biology. And once you've done this, you're off to a great start. Sure, technically you still have a Planet of Hats, but at least your hat is really interesting and spectacular. But to break your cultural monolith, you'll have to go deeper. So let's talk about regional differences. For example, Scots and Sicilians are both island-dwelling Europeans, but culturally, they're pretty different. Imagine what a few thousand years of separation would do to your orcs. In your world, you might have north versus south cultural divides, or mountains versus plains folk, or coastal traders versus inland farmers. These regional differences don't have to be major. Maybe the southern dwarves are warmer and more expressive, while the northern clans are obsessed with cheese. But they'll have similarities too. They both love a good grudge. Small differences add texture and variety without rewriting your whole species from scratch. This also means that you can add these differences as you go. Perfect for game masters and discovery writers. Use the culture template on World Anvil to track these differences and create variation. You can even pin your cultures to an interactive map so you can easily remember who your heroes will meet as they travel. And speaking of travel, how do you share these cultures through your stories? Well, as your heroes journey through your world, they'll see and experience these differences firsthand. Treat culture almost like an investigation and let your audience put together the facts themselves. This is a great way to make your audience feel like explorers, asking questions and hungry for more lore. But what about characters? After all, that's where the culture really hits on a story level. So how can you turn them into vehicles of your culture without hatifying them? Well, my favourite Klingon character was the lawyer who represented Archer in Enterprise. He showed up for one episode and I still remember him years later, because he was a unique window into actual Klingon society, the parts we hardly ever get to see. Dig in further and you'll find his mum was a biologist and his father was a teacher. These tiny insights into the culture are a far cry from the strong Klingon warrior we almost always meet. But they gave me so much more insight into how Klingon culture actually works. And here is the secret trick to bring this into your stories. Introduce different characters from a culture and allow your audience to spot the similarities, which are cultural traits, and the differences, which are personalities. Or you can introduce characters who fit the cultural ideal, like strong Klingon warriors, but show us how each one varies, because nobody perfectly embodies the true cultural ideal, and everyone is a little different. This makes your characters feel so much more authentic and varied. And after the third character they meet, your heroes will stop making assumptions and start asking questions, which is exactly what you want, because that's what engagement and curiosity looks like. One dwarf is a stereotype, 3 with different opinions, interests, and axes to grind. That's how you define a spectrum of normal for your culture. If these characters are going to be around a lot, use the character template on World Anvil to keep their personal details safe, and you can expand their relationships with your heroes over time. But you can also create a simple role table in your culture article, so you can roll up new members of this culture as you go. Either way, it's important to add that you need several characters to make this work. You can't just create one special exception, the weird one who doesn't fit in. That's still a Planet of Hats, just with a quirky tour guide. But you can include those kinds of quirky characters. In fact, they're part of a powerful trick for reinforcing your cultural world building. Because weird, quirky characters show someone who exists fully outside cultural norms. And those weirdos are the ones your audience will really remember. Show me the elf who gets drunk and sings bawdy songs, the dwarf who writes hard-boiled detective novels, or designs intricate lingerie. How do their cultures react? Are they embraced as a genius or outcast as a lunatic? This tells me even more about your cultures. What's within the space of normal and what's really unusual. This technique works best in tandem with the previous point. Establish the normal mores of this culture, then show who breaks them and what happens. These very unusual characters will still embody or be reactive to some of their cultural background, but give them unique skills or interests. Make them break the mold. That uniqueness is where your story thrives, and these are the characters your audience will remember for years to come. So now you have all the pieces to de-hatify your world, but it's important to put them together in the right order, and to know when and what you can skip at the beginning. I've been dissing the Planet of Hats here quite a lot, but there's a reason the trope was so popular. In a story with massive scope and scale, like space opera, you're introducing lots of species very quickly because you want your world to feel huge. By the way, there's an ecological version of the Planet of Hats, which is a single biome world, and Star Wars also uses that heavily for the exact same reason. Drop me a comment if you want me to do a video on single biome worlds. But Planets of Hats were designed to be one-story planets, simple constructs, and not for rich repeat stories. Because if you're trying to create cultures which will come back again and again, you need more than just a Planet of Hats. What does this mean? Well, if your heroes are spending some time in a culture, use all of these tips and tricks to make it as fascinating and engaging as you can. But how do you know how long your heroes will be spending in a culture? You might not know yet, especially if you're a game master or a discovery writer. So use these opportunities in order, from species to region to characters, to only build what you need the agile world building way. For example, if your party passes through a halfling village for a scene or two, you could probably get away with some broad strokes. Give them a very interesting hat, culturally speaking, by subverting the tropes. Introduce some sensory detail and a few varied NPCs, and then move it along. You can even show how villages change along their journey path, showing regional variations in the culture. On the other hand, if your heroes end up spending weeks negotiating an alliance here, that's the time to break out lots of varied characters, some of whom break the mold, as well as fun festivals and deeper cultural traditions. Basically, you don't need a full anthropological thesis for a one-shot, but if your campaign lives there, get weird with it. So subvert those stock tropes and start with an interesting species and culture from the get-go. Remember to add regional variation, showing how cultures diverge across landscapes and distance. And create a variety of characters who encourage your audience to form their own opinion of the culture and ask more questions. And don't forget your weirdos, those memorable folks who create contrast. Do all that and your audience will be desperate for more cultural lore and excited to explore the world you've created. Of course, there is another piece of the puzzle, one that transforms your cultures from tropey into something even more unique. Because cultures are heavily informed by their environment, and figuring out how they grew from their original biome is a great way to craft cultures that feel fresh and original. So click on the next video to learn how, and I'll see you over there. What's your take on the Planet of Hats anyway? Love it? Hate it? Have a favourite example? Let me know in the comments, and please like this video while you're down there. Then grab your hammer and go world build.